So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We initiate today a set of lectures, a set of talks, we can say, here at MAQUE Institute in Andújar. And our first speakers, I'm very happy to have him here at MAQUE Institute in Andújar with us. He is Johnny Caci. I'm going to introduce him to you. Johnny Caci was born in 1983 in Stoke-on-Trent in the UK. There in Stoke-on-Trent, he went to the primary and to the secondary school, actually to the Haywood High School, as I said, in Stoke-on-Trent. In 1999, from 1999 to 2001, he got there 3A levels in English, history, and classical civilization. Johnny Caci, after his time at the secondary school, went over to the Staffordshire University in Stoke-on-Trent. There he studied for 3 years between 2001 and 2004, English literature. He got there his Bachelor of Arts English Literature degree in 2004. After his time at the university, he did, which is very important for us here at MAQUE Institute, a TEFL certificate. Actually, he got the level 5 TEFL certificate, which is the highest level in teaching English as a foreign language, as you know. And he did it at the well-known TEFL Academy in the UK. So we are happy to have him here, not only today to give you this speak, but also as the head of the English department in this institute, MAQUE, Andújar International Institute for German Culture. So, which is very important in connection with the topic he's going to speak about today. Johnny Caci is an author. He also writes novels himself. Actually, he has a novel, The Victorian Gothic is the title, its title. This is a novel we are now publishing here at MAQUE Publishing House. We hope to get it through, to publish this novel maybe this year, most probably next year, so 2026. And the topic he is going to deal with today in his talk is even in connection, we have to understand it in connection with, at least with this novel, I suppose. Yes. The title of your speech is From Page to Pop Culture, Excavating Dracula, Frankenstein, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's Gothic roots. So let me take over to you, Johnny.
Okay, thank you for the introduction, Andres. So yes, just to reiterate what Andres has said, my talk is called From Page to Pop Culture, Excavating Dracula, Frankenstein, and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde's Gothic Roots. So Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde are pillars of Gothic literature. Their iconic status solidified through countless adaptations in films, comic books, games, and more. Today, even those who have never read these novels believe they know these characters and their stories. But do they really? Have modern portrayals stayed true to the complex figures these authors created, or has pop culture reshaped them into something else entirely? When we think of Dracula, the image that immediately springs to mind is Bela Lugosi. His Hungarian accent, clean-shaven face, slicked back hair, with a widow's peak and his signature black opera cape. However, Stoker's Dracula is far removed from this Hollywood archetype. In the novel, he is described as a tall old man with white hair, a bushy moustache, and red eyes. A spectral figure whose presence is more eerie and monstrous than the suave aristocrat of the silver screen. One of the most striking aspects of Dracula is his limited physical presence in the novel. Unlike his cinematic counterparts, who often dominate the narrative with direct confrontations and imposing charisma, Stoker's Dracula is largely an elusive figure, exerting his influence from the shadows. This is partly due to the novel's epistolary format, which comprises diary entries, letters, telegrams, and newspaper clippings. By filtering the narrative through the perspectives of his victims and pursuers, Stoker intensifies the Count's aura of mystery and menace. Dracula is spoken of far more than he is actually seen, which paradoxically makes him an even more terrifying and omnipresent figure. Dracula's first introduction in Jonathan Harker's journal is a far cry from the familiar suave vampire of film adaptations. Stoker describes him as a man with a strong, very strong aquiline face with high bridge of the thin nose and peculiarly arched nostrils, with lofty domed forehead and hair grown scantily round the temples but profusely elsewhere. His eyebrows were very massive, almost meeting over the nose, and with bushy hair that seemed to curl in its own profusion. This portrayal is distinctly unattractive, with an emphasis on his otherworldly physicality. Unlike the elegant and romanticised versions seen in later adaptations, Stoker's Dracula is an unsettling presence, further emphasised by his sharp, protruding teeth, long nails, and an inexplicable ability to climb the walls of his castle like a lizard. These monstrous details are often omitted or softened in film adaptations, which tend to favour a more charismatic and aristocratic interpretation. Despite the novel bearing his name, Dracula appears in relatively few scenes after the opening Transylvanian chapters. Yet, his presence looms over the entire book, his influence stretching across great distances through his supernatural abilities. He is a shapeshifter, capable of transforming into a bat, a wolf, mist, or even elemental dust. This allows him to be both nowhere and everywhere, a spectral telepather who manipulates the world around him without always being physically present. Unlike many film adaptations that depict Dracula as a physically dominant and combat-ready antagonist, Stoker's version is a far more insidious character, a puppet master rather than a brute force. Moreover, Dracula is merely a supernatural predator. Dracula is not merely a supernatural predator, but also a foreign invader, reflecting contemporary fears of the unknown and the dangers of an encroaching other. He is an outsider coming to England from the mysterious and superstitious lands of the East, bringing with him the corruption of an older world that threatens the modern rationalism of Victorian Britain. His move to London is not just about satisfying his thirst for blood, but about spreading his influence, challenging the social and moral order of the time. This theme of cultural invasion and contamination is something that later adaptations, particularly in Hollywood, often fail to emphasise. Interestingly, despite his role as a villain, Dracula possesses moments of surprising relatability. One such instance is when Jonathan Harker stumbles upon him in the castle's library. Instead of finding him plotting some diabolical scheme, Harker sees Dracula enjoying the simple pleasures of reading. "I am glad you found your way in here, but I am sure there is much that will interest you." These companions, and he laid his hands on some of the books, we're told, have been good friends to me, and for some years past, ever since I had the idea of going to London, have given me many, many hours of pleasure. This small moment reveals an isolated and perhaps even lonely figure, whose connection to books humanises him in an unexpected way. Far from the purely monstrous image so often seen in adaptations, Stoker's Dracula possesses a strange, melancholic depth, one that is rarely explored or seen on screen. Further reinforcing this sense of alienation, Dracula's presence in London is marked by subtle missteps that betray his foreign nature. One of the more humorous but telling details comes towards the end of the novel when he is observed wearing a straw hat in the middle of winter, a moment that subtly underscores his inability to fully assimilate into English society. While this detail is small, it adds another layer to his character, presenting him not just as a threat, but also as a figure out of place and out of time. The Count's loneliness has been depicted on screen before, most notably in Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampire. Christopher Lee, who played the character on screen more than any other actor, once said of the character, "He is a man who experiences the loneliness of evil, something he can't control, who wants to die, but there is a force in him, a malefic force, which drives him to do these terrible things." Ironically, little to nothing of this loneliness is evident in his portrayal in the 7 Dracula films he made for Hammer. However, in the 1970 Spanish film El Conde Dracula, a film which, although flawed, it gave him the opportunity to play Dracula more faithful to his novel counterpart. And his loneliness is evident in this line of dialogue, which he speaks to justify why he's leaving Transylvania. "Now the wind blows coldly through the broken battlements. Although this is my home, I must move on." However, on the whole, this deep sense of deep-rooted loneliness of a creature trapped in his own existence is largely absent from the more action-driven or romanticized versions of the character. In most of the Hollywood films, just like the Hammer films, Dracula is physically present but emotionally hollow, reduced to a more straightforward villain without the novel's layer of nuance. Ultimately, Dracula is far more than a mere villain or a seducer. He is a liminal figure caught between worlds, straddling the line between the old and the new, the monstrous and the human. In revisiting Stoker's text, it becomes clear that modern adaptations have often sacrificed this complexity, replacing it with a more digestible but ultimately less compelling version of the Count. His terror lies not just in his supernatural abilities, but in his unknowable nature, his infiltration of society, and his haunting sense of otherness, all of which remain just as chilling today as they were in 1897. Now, moving on to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I would think that of the 3 that I'm speaking about today, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is arguably the most misrepresented in popular culture. The phrase Jekyll and Hyde personality has entered the common lexicon, often used to describe someone who possesses a dual nature, one side benevolent, the other malevolent. However, this oversimplification distorts Robert Louis Stevenson's original characterization, which is far more morally ambiguous. While the novella explicitly states that Hyde is pure evil, it never describes Jekyll as purely good. In fact, Jekyll is a deeply flawed and hypocritical figure who willingly transforms into Hyde, not to escape an uncontrollable alter ego, but to indulge in pleasures that he would not otherwise permit himself while maintaining his outward, respectable identity. Jekyll is, by his own admission, a man who has always harbored secret desires, stating that "I concealed my pleasures, and when I reached years of reflection and began to look round me and take stock of my progress and position in one world, I stood already committed to a profound duplicity of life." This confession reveals that Jekyll's repression of his darker urges predates the creation of Hyde. The potion does not create a new separate entity, it merely gives physical form to the suppressed aspects of Jekyll's own nature. Jekyll is not a victim, but a willing participant in his own downfall. Visually, adaptations have also taken liberties with Hyde's portrayal. Many films depict him as a hairy bestial and hunched brute, emphasizing his animalistic nature. However, the novella's description is far more subtle. Hyde is described as being younger and shorter than Jekyll, with an indescribable quality that provokes immediate revulsion in those who see him. One of the most crucial yet often omitted details is that Hyde is frequently referred to as dwarfish, suggesting a physically diminished form rather than the hulking monster of many film adaptations. His choice of residence also offers a glimpse into the depths of his depravity. He keeps lodgings in Soho, a part of London long associated with prostitution and vice, reinforcing the idea that his transformation is not simply the descent into violence, but a surrender to all forms of illicit indulgence. The novel never explicitly states what Hyde does in his nocturnal outings, but the implications are clear. He is Jekyll's uninhibited self, acting without moral restraint. One particularly compelling interpretation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is the suggestion that Hyde's small stature represents the idea that evil begins as something small and grows unchecked. Jekyll repeatedly believes he can control Hyde, confident that he can stop at any time. However, he underestimates the allure of his darker self. Over time, Hyde becomes stronger and Jekyll finds it increasingly difficult to revert back. This gradual loss of control underscores one of the novella's central themes, the danger of self-deception. In contrast to the novella, some adaptations attempt to make Jekyll a more openly saintly figure, emphasizing his charity work and good deeds. For example, the 1931 film adaptation starring Frederick March portrays Jekyll as a selfless doctor devoted to treating the poor. However, in Stevenson's original, Jekyll is no altruist. He is a man of ambition, status, and self-interest, someone who wants to maintain his reputation while secretly indulging in his worst desires. Ultimately, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is not a straightforward tale of good versus evil, but rather a study in self-deception, repression, and the consequences of unchecked ambition. While Hyde is undoubtedly monstrous, Jekyll's greatest crime is his willingness to embrace him. By returning to the text, we see that Stevenson's novella is a far more unsettling exploration of human nature than many adaptations would suggest, reminding us that the most terrifying horrors often come from within. And last but not least, we'll turn now to Frankenstein. Perhaps no literary character has been more misrepresented in film than Frankenstein's creature. The iconic Boris Karloff portrayal with bolts in the neck, a square skull, and grunting speech has so profoundly shaped popular perception that few realise how different Shelley's original vision was. The process of creating the creature is not described in detail in the novel. There is no dramatic lightning strike, no elaborate laboratory setup. Instead, Shelley's narration is deliberately ambiguous, merely stating, with an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me that might infuse a spark of being into the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. Early in the text, we are told that the young Victor Frankenstein is enamoured with the work of alchemists such as Paracelsus, Cornelius Agrippa, and Albus Magnus. When he goes to university, his university professor, Waldman, however, introduces him to contemporary chemistry and galvanism, inspiring them with the idea that modern science has the power to unlock the mysteries of nature and even manipulate life itself. This pivotal encounter shifts Victor's focus from outdated alchemical pursuits to the cutting-edge science of his time, ultimately leading him down the path towards his fateful experiments in creating life. Waldman's influence, while initially a positive redirection, indirectly fuels Victor's ambition and sets the stage for the tragic consequences of his hubris. Additionally, Victor Frankenstein does not rob graves to assemble his creation from complete corpses. Instead, he gathers bones and decaying organic matter from charnel houses and slaughterhouses. Popular culture reimagined this process for a more grotesque, more macabre effect, overshadowing Shelley's deeper philosophical themes. Most significantly, the creature is highly intelligent and eloquent. Unlike Karloff's silent, grunting monster, Shelley's creature reads Milton's Paradise Lost, speaks in sophisticated prose, and delivers heartbreaking monologues about his suffering and rejection. The passage where he compares himself to Satan, abandoned by his creator, is one of the novel's most poignant moments. Even films like The Bride of Frankenstein, which allow the creature to speak and is admittedly a masterpiece, it fails to capture the depth of his tragic introspection. Ultimately, Frankenstein is not just a tale of horror, but a philosophical exploration of creation, responsibility, and abandonment. By stripping away the creature's intelligence and moral complexity, many adaptations reduce Frankenstein to a simple monster story, when in reality it is a profound meditation on what it means to be human. Revisiting Shelley's original text allows us to reclaim the creature's depth, understanding that he is not merely a beast, but a deeply wounded soul, abandoned by his creator and scorned by the world. By returning to the original text of these Gothic titans, we reclaim the richness of their narratives, understanding that the monsters they portray are not merely figures of horror, but mirrors reflecting human flaws and vulnerabilities. In a world saturated with simplified versions of these stories, the original works remind us that Gothic literature is as much about the human condition as it is about the supernatural. Through close reading and thoughtful analysis, we can bridge the gap between the characters we think we know and the profound literary creations that continue to captivate and inspire. Okay, that brings it to a close.
Yes, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, Johnny, for this nice speech. It's delightful with the topic and with the way you did it. Now I'm sure that we are going to have some interesting question. Is there anyone who would like to ask any questions?
Oh,
Oh, yes, please. Yeah, Carmen.
thank you, Jenny, for this speech. It was a really interesting topic. And I would really like to ask a question. I was thinking about, can you think of any screen adaptation or modern version of any novel or Gothic literature that you consider that is better than the original?
Well, that's a really good question. Thanks for that, Karen. It's currently no particularly Gothic examples spring to mind, but in my opinion, if we're looking at Victorian literature, because Frankenstein's not Victorian, but it's 19th century, and the other two are Victorian pieces. In my opinion, I would say David Lean's Oliver Twist, which is a film adaptation of Charles Dickens' novel, which is a masterpiece. I actually think the film even improves upon it because the main central character of Oliver, after the first half of the novel, he loses agency, he's not present in it very much. But in the David Lean version, he sticks quite faithfully quite close to the novel, but Oliver remains the central character throughout, and I believe that elevates it over the original. Another example, and not necessarily better, but in my personal opinion, I think it's more enjoyable. I would also draw your attention to another Victorian piece, and that's H.G. Wells' The Time Machine, which is a great science fiction novel. It's a pioneering science fiction novel, and also a masterpiece of science fiction. But the 1960 George Pal film adaptation, in my opinion, is more rounded out because the original book is a novella, it's short, but there's some interesting philosophical themes, particularly it touches upon Marxism. The film fleshes out the character of the time traveller and some of his friends like Philby. So for me, I think it's my favourite film of all time. It's better than the original novel. So thanks for that question, Karen.
Thank you.
Would you like to ask anything else? Do you like to? If
You're
not,
supposed to.
well, yes, of course. I like to ask you a lot of questions, I have to say, but we don't have much time. Let me. Well, you said something about this topic in your answer to Carmen's question, but which, in your opinion, are the most faithful screen adaptation of the three books you were speaking about?
Well, I think that's a great question. With Dracula, there's been many good films. None of them have stuck particularly close as much as I enjoy them to the novel, and it is a big novel, so it's somewhat understandable. But the BBC made a version with the French actor Louis Jourdan called Count Dracula in 1977, I believe it was. And that is, to my mind, the closest adaptation to the book. I think it's a very good version. With Frankenstein, Hallmark, an American film channel, made a version in 2004 with the former singer Luke Goss as the creature, and that is definitely the version which sticks closest to the novel. And of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the French film director Jean Renoir directed a film called Le Testament du Dr. Cordelier, in 1959, and that is definitely the version that sticks closest to the book. So I would say those three versions.
Okay, so let me ask some question about something which is not exactly, but it is related to to your talk, but it is something different. It is about your novel Victorian Gothic. Can you tell us anything about the structure or about the topic?
Yes.
About how did you came to this thought of writing a novel about this topic?
Yes, I think that's a good question, and I think it naturally leads into what I was just talking about. What is interesting is that yet again, the novels differ to their adaptations. At the end of these three books, the three principal characters all die, but there are flaws, I believe, in the way that they die, particularly with Dracula and Frankenstein. In Dracula, we're told that he needs to be staked through the heart by a wooden stake to die, but that is not the way he's dispatched. So there's a popular theory that he was kept alive secretly so that Stoker could revive him in a sequel. With Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the character supposedly commits suicide by burning himself to death in the Arctic, but there wouldn't have been any wood with which to burn himself to death. And though there have been many sequels written by other authors over the years, in my opinion, as a devotee and as a student of these great novels, they stray too far from the original. My intent is to write a sequel to all three of these novels and to honour the original works so that they will be consistent with what the original authors wrote. That's my intention.
Do you think would it be possible to propose a kind of screen adaptations of your novel in the future?
No,
But first we have to
yeah,
get it
I'm
published.
aiming high, but yeah, it would be nice.
You would agree with
Yeah, if
both
anybody wanted to, yeah, then I have no problem with that.
Okay, if there is no further question, maybe you want to ask anything else, or maybe you or someone else here in the room. If there is any further question, I tell you, Johnny, thank you very much for your talk. We are really happy to be here and to hear to your really interesting speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you.